Welcome to Sacred Spark, where purpose ignites possibility. I'm Tiffany Dedeaux of Sacred Time, and together with Gail Whipple of Spark Studio, we'll be exploring what it means to create, lead, and live in rhythm with your soul's calling. Each conversation invites you to pause in that space between knowing and becoming and listen for what's stirring within. Now, whether you're a leader, coach, or creative at the edge of change, this is your place to rekindle inspiration and remember the fire that started it all.
So one of the things that we were kicking around before we started recording was the idea of how consultants always, or at least I was outing myself that in my life when I was a consultant at a young age, I used to walk in and say, oh, this doesn't make any sense. Let's fix this so it makes sense. But of course, it was only making sense to me necessarily. It wasn't necessarily making sense to everybody, right? But I could work with it if I jury-rigged it up. Have you ever had an experience like that?
Oh my gosh, yes. And I didn't realize that wasn't just me. So I feel a little bit validated. Um, and I call myself putting together systems that are generic enough that could be used year over year. So I meant them to be just picked up and so people could continue to run. But I find that well, that was the intent and that was certainly doable. It is inherent in a lot of the leaders that I'm working with that they make it make sense to themselves.
Right.
And then they could grab it and go. And I'm just amazed at how much time that takes. Like, how do we start from here and not just start over every time? That's, I guess, my question.
Yeah, how do we start from here? You know, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but that just brought up across my heart the idea of forgiveness. Because, you know, you forgive people for what they've done to you in the past, but the past is dead, right? And we go on.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's for another time. How do we go from here in terms of systems, in terms of what we're building? In change, there was in change theory that I used to study. There was the idea of a pre-mortem, and I'm not sure exactly what they meant by pre-mortem, but I think it's kind of like looking, and you do a pre-mortem and a post-mortem because you look at what you have. That's where we're back to our place where it's the beginning and the end. You look at what the system is and you look at where you want it to go and you do a pre-mortem. Like, how could this system live? You know? And you look at what it could or could not do.
Oh, I think the key to this is taking ourselves out of the loop. Because if we're just changing things to be changing them, we're changing them to fit our mold,
Right.
and not necessarily what serves the greater good or the system. So the secret to that is, no matter what our first reaction is to the system, it's broke, it's fixed, it's like amazing, it's not. Then the first thing is then we take a step back and we remove ourselves and our preferences out of it to see, does this function, does this not function?
Yeah, I also think that by taking a step back, like you suggest, then we can look at it as the entity that it is, because the system is an entity, and we can be curious about it and explore it, and see what its possibilities are. And taking ourselves out of it, you're right. It takes our ego out. It takes our assumptions out. It allows us to see what it means to be, and whether it's making that or not.
That makes sense. There was a book that I put together. It was a paper I wrote that I published as a book, and it's called Ethics and the Earth Missionary. And the whole idea is the ethics of like when you go out into nature, and when you go into like the medical profession, you're supposed to do no harm. You're supposed to leave no trace. And so my thinking and premise from that is, if you go in and try to understand the system first before you change it, then you know what local wisdom is already there, what they've already tried, and you build from there versus starting over.
Local wisdom. What a wonderful thought. local wisdom. It's true. It's a very wise thing to do, to look at what it means to be just as it is.
Yeah. Then you're leaning on the wisdom that came before you just wholeheartedly remake the system in your own image.
Yeah. And it's fair that there is a life cycle, and it's fair that things are born and then they die. Even we know this in systems theory, right? The systems become a runaway freight train and they do break down if nothing's happened to fix them. But it doesn't mean that we have to kill everything. Like you just said, the people that you were working with that remade the thing in their own image. It doesn't always have to be remade. It doesn't have to be tampered with all the time.
No. So if we're clear on that, when we go into a new situation, we just account for that when we decide what our next steps are.
Yeah.
It strikes me because there's also the difference. It feels different to think about starting from here than starting over. Sometimes it just feels easier to not have to figure out what was already there. But is that really like efficient, or is that just being lazy? I'm just thinking.
It can certainly be characterized as lazy. It is, I certainly can see it as egotistical. It's just like making the world in your own image so that it makes you comfortable. But it doesn't necessarily make the people that you're serving the system with comfortable, because they have, especially now in this time, we understand there are multiple truths, right? There are
Oh, yeah.
seeing and knowing. So it's probably one of the reasons that IDEO's design thinking starts with empathy.
Yeah.
To really think about what the user needs and
And,
wants.
and it puts the busy in busyness, because then we think we've done something because we remade a thing. But if we step back and we look at the progression of the organization with us at the helm, we might realize we didn't even move the organization forward because all we did was remake all the systems that came before us so that it looked like we have our stamp on it or our name on it.
Yeah, it's egotistical, isn't it?
It feels that way. In this moment, it feels that way. I feel like, what am I missing?
Well, I think no. What I don't think you're. Before you look at what you're missing, you're also walking on the ground of first do no harm that you mentioned earlier.
Do no harm, leave no trace.
Do no harm, leave no trace. So, like if you're willing to look at something first and see it for what it is, before you start monkeying with it, because when you monkey with it, it's not necessarily harm, but it's changing an entity.
Yeah. Then it muddies the message because then you've got your intent coming in there when you might not have understood the original intent of the system. So maybe the first question is, you take a step back, you remove yourself from the evaluation process and you say, what is this trying to solve? Or what is this solving for? Not even trying, because that's judgment. What is this solving for? Or what is this meant to solve for?
Yeah, exactly. And then and then you can admit, in your estimation, whether it solves for that or not. But then you ask, and this is where IDEO asks for, empathy and doing user interface interviews, because you have to go out and ask more than one person, unless it's a one person system. Like the way you brush your
Yeah.
teeth, I guess, is a one person system.
I wouldn't have thought that, so thank you for that example. But this does has me think about, like, I do committees of three because any opinion, like even you get more than three opinions into a pot, like it becomes muddy, and that's not a stew, that's not ingredients that you want to layer. Um, so I could see that running it by like a committee of three, or picking a discernment committee of three to decide, okay, what's the best way forward for this? But that is also means you're intentionally not choosing the move fast to break things mode.
Yes, that move fast and break things mode. That's not.
I know you have feelings about it.
Maybe that was really clever at the beginning of the century, but at this point, it just seems like a little boy doing his worst, doesn't it?
It, I don't think we have to, I don't think it's just little boys. I
Oh,
think it is a pendulum swing, though, to the exact opposite. And I feel like every generation, some pendulum swings, and then we we swing it back because we feel like we missed something, because we can never have a balance. Apparently, the balance is the swinging, maybe. Because I think we went from, we got too many opinions that we felt too, like, the weight of that felt too heavy to move, and then if we don't account for the opinions, we can move fast and break things, figure out what works and doesn't work, but then we don't bring everybody with us, and then we swing the pendulum back. And so that is what I'm thinking is happening.
so if we're talking about the creative tension between move fast and break things and too many cooks,
Hmm.
okay,
Yeah.
like, and then we're in this pendulum swing. Where do you envision that we are if those are the two ends?
Mm. Fascinating question. What comes up for me is, I think we're swinging back towards including others and bringing everybody along. I think the pendulum is swinging back there, because for two reasons. One is, well, it's great to move fast. We hate moving alone. Some of us are tired of being alone. And so if we don't slow down for the rest of us to keep up, and we have a more robust discussion on what happens next, then, somebody's out there without us. They're not leading any change because they're by themselves over in some corner of the universe. And we're like, yeah, good luck to you. And the rest of us are going to be over here. Um, but also, if you're the one, you're like, look what we did. Oh, where is everybody? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I guess I ran too fast for the crowd.
So this is interesting. Here's where I think we're at. If I look back at what we were talking
Mm,
about, we said we start from here by taking a step back. The idea is, what's the value of starting from here as opposed to
starting over.
starting over? And then so you suggested we take a step back, and then and in that step back, we're removing ourselves to say, what is this solving for? And then we come up with a perspective. And then we run it past a discernment committee, because we're in this pendulum swing where we don't want to move fast and break things. We want to, but we don't want to we don't want to have analysis paralysis, as they used to say, right?
Right.
Um, so, and the reason we do this is not just because we don't want to move fast and break things, but because we're honoring a deeper truth about being human, and that is that we don't want to work alone.
Yeah. That's what the pendulum swing is. And it's a little bit ironic with the rise of AI, but also it's post pandemic, right? It is the recognition that on some level we do need the rest of humanity. We do need that connection point. And so that is the truth and the crossroads that we all come to.
Yeah, especially now. And AI,
Yeah.
in its most laudatory uh, iteration, is to leave humanity free to become ever more human, right? That's like some of the things they try to tell us is going to happen.
I mean, that's the part that we could decide, right? Because it is neither good nor bad, like most everything. It is how it's leveraged and how it's aimed that makes it that good or bad. So we have that opportunity to scale humanity, or to free us up for that deeper level connection that we crave.
And it also applies to systems. What you just suggested is the system that we're talking about is not good or bad, it's how it's leveraged and aimed.
Yes. And so I think that's the thing then, is that's the middle of the pendulum swing. If I'm running and I'm like moving fast and breaking things to see what works and putting it back together so that it can function for this next chapter, I'm doing that from the standpoint of likely what works best for me or what I think works best for others, without recognizing that it was fine how it was and maybe I build from here.
Mhm.
Or at least giving that the opportunity, being open to that opportunity.
Yeah. So as we wind up, we're talking about instead of trying to write a chapter, maybe we're trying to write a whole book on the system, a whole life cycle for the system. Like what is fine about it the way it is. Like, and we were using a specific ideation of a system. It's like when somebody takes over a job on a volunteer board or something like that, is like what, instead of having to always remake everything every year or every 2 years or every 3 years or whatever the board is doing, it would be like, let's sit down and learn what is fine about what we have and what needs to change by taking a
Yeah.
step back, right? And
Yes.
yeah.
And I specifically see that because year over year and all the years that I serve, I try very hard to establish onboarding, or then I hear complaints about like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, or we like do the handoff, we have the conversations, we write the books, we do the things, and still people come in and they need a way to feel comfortable before they can build from that point. And then it feels like we never get anywhere. But I think that is why, is because we may have unconsciously done this where we automatically start over versus starting from where everybody is.
Uh-huh. Well, so does this discussion make you want to change any of your behaviors going forward?
It makes me more aware of them. Like how selfish of me to think, oh, this system doesn't work because I don't understand it. Like, it has me approaching it differently.
That's how I felt when I started to learn more about creativity, in my work. And I've always been a creative, but back in the day when I was so busy saying my painting had to be the one that hung in the Systems Hall of Fame as opposed to, when you start thinking about collaboration and stuff like that, then you realize that there's richness in everything that is, even the things that are dying, right? So it really behooves us to wonder how we can work with what there is already. But not to be too dedicated to that, not to, because there's nothing wrong with something new and novel. New and novel, well, I didn't need to say both of those. It's one of the same thing. But it doesn't always have to be novel. And, it can be iterative. We can look at it as
Hmm.
iterative.
Yeah. So there is that opportunity to recognize why we are changing the thing. There
Yeah.
might be insight in that as well. Because if we're doing that because we think the system is broken, that's one thing. If we're doing it because we are not comfortable to operate from this vantage point, that is different.
And that's a really good, you've said that word just a while back too about feeling comfortable. Comfortable is a big realization because human beings are always looking to be comfortable.
Because in that's the that's when we feel the most in control, right?
And
Then it feels more comfortable to reach out for something more or to reach for the next person. It's sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If we're in survival mode, we have different tolerance for different things than if we're in the mode of thriving at the top of the pyramid.
yeah, thriving and not to put too fine a point on it, but that whole idea of being a tree and being rooted, or being grounded, it's like that there's something important about that as opposed to, like you say, scattering around and not feeling like you have any purchase on the land that you're standing on. You have to be able to be grounded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can, right? Because you can reach taller and have more presence if you feel grounded and rooted and comfortable where you are. You feel like you have at least that much control that you can count on. Then it allows you to accept more risk. And I'm thinking that while I'm looking out the window, um, the trees are not moving today. But yesterday, there's one in the distance that is so tall and narrow. I was like, what is it doing? It was just bending left and right and swaying. I was like, geez, the breeze. But if that tree, as tall as it is, did not have deep enough roots, it would have fell over yesterday.
Yesterday would have been the end for it. Huh?
But the trunk is therefore bendable, pliable enough that it could just sway and still be okay. And maybe that's what we want for the system. There needs to be deep enough roots into the organization it serves, the community, the government that it serves, that it could bend and sway and be pliable but not break, just like people.
Yeah, and the system has to. It's not necessarily a living thing in the sense that we talk about humanity being living, but it has to have its own comfort zone, its own rootedness. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about quite a bit of stuff here. The most it still means the idea of starting from here instead of starting over. Because, well, we talked about how life is cyclical and it's always starting over. But then that means we always have to be ready to start from here in our virtuous spiral up, right?
Yeah. It means we're always at choice too. You're either starting here or starting over.
Yeah, starting here, starting over. And from that place of choice, be curious. Take a step back in time, take a deep breath, take a step back, whatever it is, to see what the system is solving for, or what this moment is, what's trying to happen, or what is a creation, as I say, what is a creation trying to create at this moment?
Like what is trying to be birthed. I got you.
What's trying to be both. Yeah. And then from there, we're not moving fast to break things, and we're not doing analysis paralysis. We're including others in helping us make sure that we're making wise and first do no harm type choices. And we're thinking about comfort for the people involved and the users involved. And we're thinking about the idea of having a stable, deep-rooted, whatever you want to call it, system that we can go on with. Any other thoughts about that to embroider on that?
I just think that it comes down to two things. I think my top two takeaways then from this is, one is it all depends on the intention that we come in with, whether we're conscious of it or not. And then what an amazing thing to consider that we're always at choice, and choice is our power. So in this case, we have the choice of, do we start over or do we start from here? Some of that might give us comfort. Some of that might weigh us down, but that might influence our choice, what we do pick.
Thank you for listening to Sacred Spark. If today's conversation stirred something within you, let it take root. You can join us for Deepening Your Roots, our guided journey for growth and grounded renewal. Learn more at our website, sparking.space. On behalf of Tiffany, Dedeaux, and myself, Gail Tucker Whipple, until next time, may your spark stay lit and your path stay sacred.